Hey everybody, good to see you on this fine Tuesday. Feels like it's been a really long time since I've made a video, so I'm glad to get back at it. Today is, for you anyway, it is Tuesday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, and in Trivium today we are going to get going on fallacies. We haven't done anything with those since your quiz that you took last Thursday. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to let me know. We're still working on appeals to emotions, and we're not going to do any more fallacies this week. We'll start again next week, and I am pretty sure that we're going to have a quiz next week too, but I'll keep you posted on that, okay? Just one other thing too to remind you, you are going to have your rough draft of your proverb due tomorrow, May 6th, and because of that, what we're doing today is actually going to be due on Thursday. Okay, so I just want you to remember that. We're going to get through the notes. Probably a good idea for you to get caught up. Make sure you do your index cards. But it's not actually going to be due, the worksheet that is, until Thursday to give you enough time to get that proverb rough draft done. Okay, so if you have any questions about that, feel free to hit me up today, private comment or email. I prefer email, and I will answer those questions for you. But let's get into it. All right, go full screen here on my screen. All right, now it's mini me. And just taking a look, getting started for this week. Your warm-up asked you to tell me why you think car insurance companies use people like Shaquille O'Neal who have no background in car insurance whatsoever, and especially the one that he was in, that ad. I don't think that company would be one that he would insure himself with. So why would they use him as a spokesperson rather than maybe like a customer who uses it, or even maybe somebody from their own company? Okay, and that's a really good segue, I think, into what we're going to talk about today. So we have our distance learning worksheet here for the fallacies, and we have the PowerPoint. I'm just going to bring it up this way because I have a couple of different slides that'll help you out here. So we're going to go through it like this. But if you need to take a look at it, feel free to do that, or you can also obviously watch this video and it'll tell you everything you need to know. All right, so we're still in appeals to emotion, right? And those are fallacies that make people feel. Before ad phantom, we're attacking the source. Now, we started off with appeals to fear and to pity, right? Those are very real emotions that people feel on a pretty regular basis, okay? And with mob and snob appeal from last week, that's a little bit different, right? It doesn't necessarily, at least right away in your brain, shout emotion, feeling. But if you really think about it, it does, right? Like mob appeal appeals to the idea that people feel like they need to belong. And then snob appeal means that people want to feel important, right? They're appealing to both of those emotions that a lot of people have. Okay, and today is going to be very similar to that too, is it's going to appeal to a need inside that we might not consider an emotion, but we'll get to that when we get there. Okay, so today you're going to need a writing utensil, obviously a positive attitude, 2 index cards at least, and I'll explain why, but if you have 2, you should be good. Your fallacy worksheet obviously as well, because you're going to need to get that done for Thursday. Okay, so your first one, right? You can hit the pause button if you'd like, but we have appeal to illegitimate authority, and the Latin argumentum ad verecundiam, that's to shame, and the definition is going to be an appeal. It is an appeal to emotion that's attempt to shame the listener into an agreement by citing an illegitimate authority. Okay, and we'll get to what an illegitimate authority is in just a second. But this one is appealing to the emotion of shame, and an authority is somebody who is supposed to be above you in a sort of power structure, right? Now, illegitimate, if something is legitimate, that means it's real, right? Like if there was somebody who was an authority to you in the law, it would be somebody like a judge or a cop. But an illegitimate authority might be someone that is like an older sibling or something that tries to tell you exactly what the laws are, but it might not be something that's in their area of expertise. Okay, remember, hit the pause button if you need to get caught up on these notes. We're going to move on. Okay, so when it comes to illegitimate authority, there are really 4 different types. And the first one is that it's going to suggest that we accept the opinions of someone who has no expertise in the field in which they're speaking, right? And this is Shaquille O'Neal, right? The idea that he is in those car insurance ads when he has no background in it. And this one down here, Justin Bieber tells you to buy this toothpaste because he has white teeth and it'll do the same for you. Well, Justin Bieber might have a good smile. I'll give him that. And he might have a good singing voice, but he has absolutely no background, at least as far as I know, about strengthening enamel and what goes into making a healthy smile. Okay. So why do we use people like that then? Well, simple, because we know these people, and sadly, we're shamed into kind of wanting to be those people, right? I mean, I would probably, if I could, even if I had to be 4 inches shorter to be Justin Bieber, I would totally take that singing talent and the amount of money that comes along with it, right? So they're shaming us in that fact, is that they make us feel or wish that we could be on the same level as those people. All right. So another one is you accept the opinion of a biased authority. Okay. And a bias means prejudice. Now, we need to be careful because prejudice, there's usually some racial undertones to that. And that's not what we're talking about here. It just means a predetermined feeling, right? So here's an example of that. A guy or woman, I guess, Dr. Dr. Crentist, Richfield's finest dentist, states that the most healthy thing a human can do is to brush and floss every day. Well, how might they be biased? Well, they're a dentist, right? And so they believe that to be healthy, one needs to have a healthy smile. So for a dentist to tell me the healthiest thing I can do is to brush my teeth every day, not saying that it can't be true, but they obviously kind of have an opinion that's centered around having good oral hygiene, okay? Definitely a little bit of a prejudice there. Okay, this one right here, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. And yes, by the way, if you're wondering, this was a real advertisement from the 1960s. And so you're wondering, well, they're trying to say that doctors smoke Camels, so they must be healthier than any other cigarette. But what I'm seeing is that you have a picture of a doctor holding a Camel cigarette, and it could be pretty easily deduced that he's probably being paid so that he can advertise that brand of cigarette. Okay. But they're trying to get at that, right? They don't say it, right? Does it say on there that it's healthier? No. But for the fact that apparently more doctors smoke them, that makes them healthier than any other cigarette brand. Cigarettes are bad no matter what, ladies and gentlemen. All right. They're bad for your health no matter what. Okay. Now, this one is interesting. Suggesting that we accept the opinions of an unnamed expert, right? So this is like somebody publishes a huge article in a newspaper talking about how the world is going to end in 2 years because of all of the pollution in the air. And they have all of these great points about how there's so many pounds of carbon dioxide in the air from car emissions, and how there's sulfuric acid in the air from a bunch of factory smoke. But then at the end, they don't add their name, right? Well, here's the problem with that is if they don't tell us who they are, they could just be some kook who's making up a whole bunch of stuff to try to get us to believe it. Or they could be somebody who is on the opposite side of those companies that are making all of that pollution, and they're just trying to scare you away from doing that, right? If you don't put your name on something, it usually means one of two things. One is that you don't want anybody to know who you are because you really don't have any expertise in what you're doing. Or secondly, if they found out who you were, they would figure that you were totally full of baloney. Okay. So if you see somebody who gives you this recommendation of what to do, but they don't attach their name, be careful about that. And then lastly, kind of going back to what we talked about in the beginning, right? You're going to have someone who transfers their celebrity over from a completely unrelated area. And it's pretty easy why they do that and why it's so popular in ads today is because we know these people, and deep down there's a part of us that wants to be like all of these people. Okay. Now, I challenge you, especially now since we're in distance learning right now, a lot of you are probably watching more TV than you're probably accustomed to doing. If you're streaming anything or watching commercials in between your shows, take a look and see how often this happens. It's absolutely ridiculous. There might be some where you could argue there's a loose correlation or a loose relatability. Like there's sometimes I'll see actresses or even actors to some degree advertise for like makeup or beauty products. I mean, could you argue that they use it and that's why they're an expert? Maybe, but they're not people that make these products, right? They're a pretty face to attach to this product to make people want to buy it more because they think it will sell better or do better for them. Okay, so that's illegitimate authority. An authority is someone that you're supposed to look up to. For something to be legitimate means that it's worth it or worthy of it. And to be illegitimate is the exact opposite. So you're appealing to somebody who does not have that higher authority, but you're doing it anyway. Okay, next one, chronological snobbery. This is your second flashcard. On the front, chronological snobbery. On the back, write this definition. Involves rejecting or accepting something merely on the basis of its age. Okay, now here's why I said that you could have at least 2 flashcards, right? Because there really are 2 different forms and we'll go through it. Now, as long as you can keep them apart, they are an appeal to tradition and the fallacy of novelty. So if you wanted to create a flashcard for each of those, I think that's probably a good idea, but I want you to remember that they are both tied to chronological snobbery, okay? Now, if somebody says something's in chronological order, that means that it's in order of time, right? So chronological just means time. So this means that people are being snobs, like snob appeal, based on something to do with time. Okay, so the first one is an appeal to tradition. A tradition is something that's been around for a long time. Excuse me. I promise you I'm not sick. It's just my allergies. So because something's been around for a long time, it doesn't make it a good idea, right? Like someone might say, oh, that's just like my grandma used to make back in the day. I can tell you, I had 2 grandmothers and both of them had some sort of experience with cooking, okay? I had one grandma, my grandma Plog, she could cook any dish like a regular meal. Oh my gosh, that woman could cook like nobody I ever met before. But I remember she used to make cookies from time to time and they were awful, just not good. So depending on what it is, saying just like grandma used to make doesn't necessarily mean that it's automatically good. And my other grandma, my grandma Blazik, she was the exact opposite. She was an okay cook for regular meals, but oh my goodness, that woman, when she couldn't sleep, she would wake up and bake cookies in the middle of the night. So she would always have freezers full of jars of cookies. And every time we went over there, we'd always take a jar of cookies home. Best cookies I have ever had in my life, whether it's at a specialty bakery from a grocery store or homemade, best cookies ever, right? But once again, her regular cooking was average to above average, right? So saying just like grandma used to make, we associate that with being just automatically good in terms of food, but I don't think that's always the case. And then also, like, this reminds me of the old days. I can't tell you how many times I've heard my dad's dad say that. And it's funny because he says that, and the first 9 years of his life, he grew up in the Great Depression. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the old days. And those were not good old days. Especially when you get into Mr. Wongard's class next year. He's going to talk about the Dust Bowl that happened during the Great Depression, and it was absolutely awful, right? So saying just because it was like the old days, they associate it with being good, but really, there were lots of bad times in the old days. Okay, this one right here, this is a picture at a rally where it's talking about banning or preventing gay marriage from becoming legalized. And they can say right here, they have a Bible verse about how the tradition is that marriage is between a man and a woman. And that's the reason why it should stay that way, because it's a long-standing tradition. Well, just because it's been that way for a long time, it doesn't mean that that automatically makes it the only way it can be, right? We've come a long way. We've learned a lot of things about people and who they are and how they're born, right? So using that old argument isn't necessarily the best way to explain why it needs to be one way or another, okay? Now, here's the other side of it. It's the exact opposite, the fallacy of novelty, okay? And it's saying that the cool new thing is the thing that you need to have, right? And the problem is I have a lot of students that confuse this with with snob appeal, because they think that it kind of sounds like they need to have the expensive thing. That's not it, right? It's the fact that when things are coming out on a new basis, on a constant basis, that you need to continue to have the new thing, right? Whether it's the iPhone, video games, new clothing items. When you get older, the new brand of car, the new year of car, the same exact model, but it's 2020's version instead of 2019, right? Sometimes people want to get new stuff simply because it's new. Now, when you're like Mr. Plog and you drive your 2002 car to the point where it doesn't even make it to where you're going, and you buy a new car, that's not a fallacy of novelty. My car died and I needed a new one, okay? When we talk about the fallacy of novelty, we're saying that we need something even if the other thing isn't bad, simply because the other thing we want is the new version, okay? If you've heard of the coronavirus right now, they've talked about it. They call it a novel virus. That's because it is a new virus that has never hit humanity before, at least that we know of. So if you ever hear that phrase brought up about it, that's actually where it gets its name from, because it is a new contagion that we've never experienced before. Okay. Remember, once again, if you decide to, you can make a flashcard of this. I would recommend it, but I'm not going to require that you do it. All right. So after this, you're going to do that exit ticket. It's going to give you a scenario of chronological snobbery. You're going to have to tell me which version of the two it is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is all I've got for you today. Remember, worksheet due Thursday. Proverb tomorrow. All right, have a good day.